record now. Thanks, Michelle.
You're welcome.
That's a great idea.
Yeah.
And Rabbi Sari, I know you're on here. I don't know if you're a co-host, but I want to make sure. Hi, Rabbi. I'm going to make you a co-host so that if other people are coming in, maybe you can let them in.
Sure.
Thank you. All right. So can you see my screen? Wonderful. So a little bit about anxiety from Proverbs, which is actually a text that's quoted often in Christian tradition. I hear it quoted by politicians all the time. It is our text. It is a Jewish text. And here's what it says. Da'aga b'lev ish yashchena v'davar tov v'samchena. So if there is anxiety in a person's mind, let them quash it. Let them shove it down and turn it into joy with good word. So that's what our Tanakh, that's what our sacred text has to say about anxiety. Now the Gemara, which is a text that comes probably a couple of thousand, maybe 1,000 years after Proverbs was written, or at least a few hundred years, the Gemara explains Proverbs. If there is anxiety in a person's heart, let them quash it, right? That's the word, that's the phrase that we just read, Yashchena. But Rabbi Ami and Rabbi Asi dispute the verse's meaning. One said he should forcefully push it down out of his mind, Yashchena. One who worries should banish his concerns. So that's the first opinion. And that's really what we see from Proverbs. However, the other Rabbi Asi says, this actually means that he should quash it, not by shoving it down, but letting it out. So telling others his concerns, which will lower his anxiety. So we see two different models. One, shoving that anxiety and that feeling down. And on the other hand, releasing it and sharing it with others. And we're going to hear from Michelle what she suggests. Which one of our rabbis is a little bit more contemporary with his anxiety healing methods. So that's the first text I want to share. Here's another example. Give me one second. So the Gemara again quotes from the Book of Ben Sira, do not suffer from tomorrow's trouble. That is, do not worry about problems that might arise in the future as you do not know what the day will bring. So the Gemara is telling us you have to live in the present moment, just like we started tonight's session. How do you sit in your chair with your tea and your wine and your feet on the ground and take those deep breaths and actually be in the present? That is the best way to avoid anxiety. Perhaps when tomorrow comes, the Gemara says, the individual who is so worried will not even be among the living. I mean, God forbid, of course, but it's a good point. We have to be in the moment. We don't know what tomorrow brings. Are we going to be sick? Are we going to be not with our loved ones? How do we invite ourselves to be present? We don't want to be the person who is consequently upset over a world that is not her own. We want to be thinking about the world that we are living in. That's what the Gemara is teaching us. Interestingly enough, this text actually ends not about anxiety, but in the same text, it says, prevent a public crowd from inside your house. Do not let many people enter, and do not even bring all your friends into your house. It's almost as if the Gemara, at the time that this text was written, they were also living through a pandemic. They were also living through some kind of incredible stress, knowing that even though you want to bring friends into your house, you're not able to. So those are some ways that our text understands anxiety. I had one more, but it's not letting me show you. Let me see if I can do it. Here it is. It's just funny, so I have to show you. I love this text. You all know the Book of Esther. So here's just one book from Esther. Vatit chalchal hamalka ma'od. When Esther's servants came in and informed her, the queen was greatly agitated. She was anxious. She was angry. She was stressed. She sent clothing for Mordecai to wear so that he might take off his sackcloth, but he refused. So I love this vision. Vatit chachal hamalka me'od. Esther, the queen, she was so agitated. She was so frustrated. She was so anxious. She was so overwhelmed because Mordecai wouldn't listen to her. How many of us have had those moments where we are feeling anxious or frustrated, and we really just want to be able to contain our feelings and deal with ourselves, but someone else might be causing us to feel a certain way. And we want to be our best selves. We want to be that version of Esther, who in the end of the book is our heroine, and she acts with goodness, she acts with patience. But even someone like Queen Esther had her moments of agitation, her moments of stress, her moments of frustration. So I think that that's a really good example for us. None of us are perfect. We all have these moments where our stress elevates and we aren't our best selves. So that's what I want to leave us with as we kick off, hearing from Michelle. So I'm going to spotlight our videos, but hopefully you can also still see each other if you'd like. So I'm going to introduce Michelle. We're going to have a conversation and then open up for some questions. First of all, Michelle, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
I feel really lucky. We started a new mommies group over Zoom when COVID started, and I see some of the other mommies here. I see Sydney and Bettina have joined, so I'm so glad. But I really was able to get to know Michelle, and she's an incredible, amazing friend and person, and Emma. And so I'm just going to share. Michelle Massi is a licensed marriage and family therapist and has been treating OCD and anxiety for 15 plus years. Michelle has a private practice here in Los Angeles where she specializes in cognitive behavioral therapy to treat OCD, OC spectrum disorders, and anxiety disorders in children, teens, and adults. Wow, amazing. She provides consultation to other therapists and is a national speaker on OCD and anxiety. And actually, if you search her in podcasts, there are a few podcasts she's been featured on, and she's spoken so eloquently. So if you want more tonight, after tonight, and I know you will, go ahead and add some of those podcasts in your app. Michelle was Associate Clinical Director at the UCLA OCD Intensive Treatment Program. She worked at the UCLA Child OCD Anxiety and Tic Disorders Program, as well as the UCLA Adult Anxiety Research Program. And as I said, if you missed it before, Michelle is bought by, she grew up at Stephen Wise. She's a daughter of our congregation, and we're so thrilled to have you share with us and hopefully help us find some guidance and some healing during this really challenging time. So, I think I'll just start by asking, what we're all dealing with right now in this pandemic is so unique to our lifetime, of course. But there's also no doubt that we live in a really high stress and high pressure and high paced world. So I'd love for you to sort of define what anxiety is in clinical terms, and also to tell us how you've seen that affected or changed in your practice because of the events of this past year.
Sure. So we use anxiety and worry interchangeably, but they're a little bit different in that worry tends to be more in our head. So, and very specific. I'm worried about an upcoming exam, obviously pre-COVID. Right now it could be like, I'm worried about contracting COVID. I'm worried about, a lot of my clients are worried about giving COVID to family members. And then anxiety is something we more feel in our body. And, like we feel like our heart racing, or I carry my anxiety in my stomach. I always have. I lose my appetite. And so that's more of a bodily sensation that we get, but we use them interchangeably. A lot of times we'll just say I have anxiety, but we're really thinking, I think, about worry. And then in terms of what we've seen this year with COVID is that anytime there's something blowing up in the news, we tend to get anxious and worried about it. My job as an OCD specialist is we will see people come in, in the 90s and even early 2000s, it was a big worry about AIDS and contracting AIDS. Then it was, there was the anthrax scare. And then there was, each time there's some big scare, there's something in it, and a big group of people become more worried about it and seek therapy about it. And so this year, 2020, is the pandemic. But it's, as you've said, we're used to lots of anxiety, lots of high stress. So it's not an unusual thing. It's just something that, I think, number one, we haven't seen typically, like AIDS, yes and no, came and went, but I don't feel like it was impacting our day to day as the pandemic did, right? Even anthrax, it was here for a second and then gone. We're more used to like everyday worries, like, will my job be secure? Where will I go to college? Those kinds of things. And this is like, we don't know when it's going to end. We don't know what it's going to look like. I remember I happened to be on maternity leave when the pandemic really started. And I was for sure thought, no problem, I'll be back in the office when things, I think the original like let us out date was like May 15th. And I was like, okay, I'll be back in the office after that. I was sure we were going to be doing Passover with our family. And here we are, like at Monica almost. And it's like, I'm not back in the office. I have no idea when I'm going to be back in the office. So it's, I think, a different kind of experience that we've never had before.
Right, right. So I'm hearing the difference of anxiety that's in our bodies physically. And I know I've been feeling that for sure. Shoulders are up here. I broke my night guard because I found it into bits.
Yeah.
And also, I've heard the term situational stress, which is that something that we're experiencing now? So it's like a situation that feels like forever, but not necessarily will be forever.
Right, right. And it's what are we doing about work? What are we doing about school? What are we doing about socialization? How is this going to impact us long term? How is this impacting us short term? And so it's this, the situation is different for every little person, but it's a big experience for everybody.
Right. So we have a lot of parents on this call, whether parents of adult children or, so many of us have little kids at home. I'm wondering, how does anxiety affect our parenting? Or, if we're not parents or we're not parenting, how does it affect our friendship style or even our grandparent style? And like, what have some helpful tools been for you, especially as a new mom, to
Mhm.
help manage our anxiety around our parenting?
Yeah. So, it's what we give off, our kids will pick up on. And I always let clients know, especially if they're a new parent or just a parent in general, or a client who, when I'm talking to their parents, I'm not here to blame. There's no blame. We all are functioning as well as we can. And self-care self-love are super important during this time. But when we're anxious, our kids feed off on that. So it's really important that we take care of ourselves and we build a foundation for ourselves so that we can present to them. And it's not presenting fake. I don't mean to go around pretending everything's okay. But if they see us taking care of ourselves, they will feel more confident about what's going on and less afraid. Um, and so it's really important to do that. When I talk to any of my clients, most of them have parents who are also anxious, right? It's not just a one generation thing. And what they'll often say is like, what the narrative in the home was always be prepared for the worst outcome. Like you may get sick, wash your hands. This may happen. Don't do that. And some of it is obviously normal safety things, but a lot of it is also just sort of overgeneralization. And so that narrative felt normal to them. And so then they keep doing that same narrative. And so we're teaching our kids that narrative that we always have to be safe and we always like don't try new things. And so we have to be careful. It's finding that fine balance between like giving ourselves space to feel that anxiety and also teaching our children about resilience and all of that. And in terms of what I do for myself, I think it's really about taking care of myself, making sure you and I talked when we were in the mommy group about getting out and taking walks, doing things that we enjoy, taking time for our hobbies. If you're feeling overwhelmed and you need 5 minutes from your child, put your child where, this is all about a time of do what you need to do in order to get by. Put your child wherever they need to be, as long as they're safe, and lock yourself in the bathroom or the bedroom and just take some deep breaths. But really, go out and have or order in some food that you enjoy, things that you enjoyed before before. Bring some of that back into your life now. Figure out whether it's a text to a friend or watching. My husband and I, he's going to kill me for saying this on record, but we've been watching like cheesy Netflix movies. Holiday was very cute. Doing stuff like that is fun and can help lower our anxiety, because then we're not constantly, last week with the election going on, CNN was on in our house 24 hours a day, basically. And we don't typically watch the news that much. So it's like, get away from the news, get off our phones for a little while, and just kind of enjoy and be present.
Right. So it all comes back to being in the moment,
Mhm.
answering what you need. And I love what you said about authenticity. I've often
Mhm.
worried about, how my anxiety might rub off on my daughter. I want her to be able to be her own person, but I also think that showing her that I have anxiety, I have stress, and that I take care of myself in it is actually more authentic and more real than telling her, mommy's totally fine.
Mhm.
I
Yep.
think the balance, right? Of course, she's tiny, but
Mhm.
so she doesn't understand yet. But
Mhm.
finding that like balance between authenticity and communicating what you need to
Mhm.
communicate. I love
Yeah.
that.
Yep.
I'm wondering about the text that I showed earlier.
Yeah.
From Proverbs, right? It was suggesting that we suppress our anxiety. And then the other rabbi, of course, in the Gemara suggests actually that's not the best way to deal with anxiety, but rather we need to share it. So I'm wondering what your training and your practice have taught you about quashing anxiety. And does it ever go away if we shove it down, or does it always find a way to come back up?
No, there's a great quote that we use often in therapy, and it's what you resist persists, right? So the more we try and push things away, the more we say, like, this is bad, I can't feel it, I can't experience it, I shouldn't have those thoughts. The more we're giving it power by doing that. We're saying, I can't handle it, and that's what you're communicating, and that I'm not strong enough to deal with this, and this is bad. And instead, what we want to say, I talk a lot with my clients about, it's really important to know that I can handle this. It might be scary. We can give voice to that. We can say, this makes me sad or afraid. It makes me happy, but it's really important to not push things away. Look, there's a time and place for everything. And, sometimes we can't handle things and we just need to like shove it away for a second and go do something else, watch a movie or play online or whatever. But at some point, it's going to come back. And it's really important to be able to have healthy coping skills for dealing with those things rather than quashing it.
Right. I love
Yeah.
that. So we have to say Rabbi Ami was not hitting the nail on the head. Rabbi Asi was killing it.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. I loved him.
I'm curious. So something that I've learned about myself during this time, and I've seen it in others as well, is this definition of introvert versus extrovert, or ambivert. If anybody feels like sharing in the chat what you are, it might be interesting to see what a group of people consider themselves to be. I would say I thought I was an extrovert. And actually, I think I'm more of an ambivert. Like I'm seeing more and more that I recharge by myself, even though I'm outgoing and I love to be with people. Um, but I'm wondering sometimes when, especially if we're an introvert or if one of our children is an introvert, and they are, oh, good, Brenda, thank you. You're a little bit of both. Yeah, ambivert. This is a word that I learned during quarantine. Um, I've I've learned that it can be harder to articulate
Mhm.
sometimes for an introvert. And so, what if we have a child, or we ourselves are having trouble communicating when our anxiety comes up? What are some things that we can do? Because I know for me, particularly when I feel overwhelmed, it can be really hard to share.
Mhm.
But then the second I can get out and share or even laugh at something stupid, I feel so much better. So, but there can be that feeling of being stuck.
Mhm. Yeah. So I think the first thing in any of this is really acknowledging what you're experiencing. You don't even have to say it out loud, but having an awareness of like, oh, I'm struggling right now. One of my favorite tools in the therapy universe is journaling. Journaling is amazing. And I've always been a person, I don't journal on a regular basis, but I've always found that when I'm struggling with something or I'm frustrated with a person, if I'm not ready to talk to them, I do so well like to journal, and I can journal out all my thoughts, and I'll notice that all of a sudden it helps me be calmer, and that I don't have to I won't keep ruminating on it. So sometimes even just journaling, because it's a lot harder to try and explain. I know I have friends and clients who will say like, I want to tell you what I'm experiencing, but I'm afraid that if I try to describe it or explain it, like you won't really understand because I won't use the right language. And so it's sometimes it's helpful to just like write it down, or there's tons of like memes on Instagram, or anxiety things to follow. Sometimes even reading somebody else's words about it is like, yes, yes, that's exactly what I'm feeling. So I found that that's helpful.
I love that. Yeah, it's a beautiful thing in a way that anxiety and stress are something that we talk about so much in our in our day to day on Instagram. You see people sharing more and more, and it's such a relief to not feel alone. And I love that also about reading the text, seeing that Queen Esther is agitated and anxious and frustrated. Like, makes me feel like someone that I've looked up to my whole life
Yeah.
also has those feelings as well. And I love your idea about journaling, especially because for a lot of us who are managing so much right now, whether you're trying to run a business or you're trying to parent, the thought of sitting down and writing in a journal doesn't feel possible. But what if you just wrote some notes to yourself in your phone? Something that worked for you, or a moment that you felt like you couldn't share. Technology can really help us in those moments, and especially when we feel strapped for time. So I really love the journaling or just writing down idea so much. So like I said earlier, it's so nice to be able to see everybody in this gallery, and I've loved these opportunities to be on Zoom, with wise women in particular, and always with my students. But how do we deal with anxiety when we don't have our normal outlets and our normal connections? I know you said it's great to get out for a walk and take care of yourself, but how do we keep reminding ourselves that this is temporary, and what do we do when we don't have our normal crutches and our normal things that give us so much strength and energy, like community in person? I mean, we have this amazing
Yeah.
virtual community, but it's not exactly the same.
Yeah, I think that's what everybody's struggling with, and it's hard to motivate to get out of bed when, businesses are shut down, or your job isn't what you normally have, or you've got Zoom fatigue. And so I've talked to my clients about really thinking outside the box. What are some things that you've always wanted to do that you couldn't because you had a long commute, or um, what are the things that what hobbies? I had a friend text me the other day, and she was like, I've been asking everybody what new hobbies they've picked up during quarantine. I learned how to make challah. This friend of mine decided, right? This friend of mine decided that she was going to start cartooning, especially political cartoonies, but it was the way that she could process everything going on. I've had other friends who've picked up other hobbies, jewelry making. I had a client who started learning how to weave. So I think it's trying to find different things, and not trying to, we always try, and this comes up a lot in like with food allergies, or, when someone's decided to go vegan, or have a gluten allergy, they tell you don't try and don't like try and make pasta necessarily with gluten-free something, or don't like vegans don't usually often that's ironic. But they don't often like, the meat burgers, because it's like, don't try to replace what you're taking away. And I think that's something similar about right now, is don't necessarily try and replace exactly what we've lost this year, but instead try and find something different or new, or a different way to look at it. So that we're not just constantly comparing, well, it's really nice to hang out with people in person, I can't do it. When I was initially looking at mommy and me classes, I was initially like, I don't want to do this. What's the point? You're not meeting people. And so we came up with a different alternative that was similar, but it was like we adjusted it for now. So it's trying to find different things that aren't just a replication of what we would have done in person.
I absolutely love that, thinking outside of the box. And it seems hard. Like, it doesn't seem
Mhm.
like it's something that is easy or necessarily comes naturally, but hey,
Right.
we've got time on our hands.
Yes.
Um, That's really really beautiful. So I know that for kids, as an educator, I've learned some about kids' brains, and I certainly don't have any in the knowledge that you have, but so that's why you're here to share with us. But I know vaguely that kids who are, under 7, their brains understand things differently, and they don't understand permanence
Mhm.
necessarily. And they don't have,
They have no future time perspective.
that's right. I don't know who said that, but thank you. Um, and they also, so they don't necessarily have the same patience that we have, even though we may feel like we're impatient, is totally different for a child, and they don't have the same perspective or hope right now. So I'm wondering, how do we support our kids in what they're going through right now? What have you seen that's been particularly hard for kids and particularly helpful? And yeah, I think that's enough. Yeah. What have
Yeah.
you seen that's been in your
I'll
practice with children?
I'll start with the difficult part, the missing the friends. That's been the hardest, right? Is these are social little kids that really enjoy for the most part. My anxious kiddos who had social anxiety at school, they're loving this. They're like, this is where I belong, right? But a lot of kiddos, they're missing hanging out with their friends and doing normal play dates and doing normal activities. Just the structure of school that brings. I know a couple moms have said like, bedtime before was at a specific time. Now all hell's broke loose, right? And so it's really like that's the difficult part. Also, Zoom fatigue. Every school is doing it differently. I have some kids who are on Zoom from 8 to 3, and I have other kids who have sort of like sporadic, like a lot of independent time. Or 9 to 11 they're on, and then everything else is on their own. So coming into therapy at the end of the day when they've been on Zoom for 8 hours already, it's like I can barely keep their attention. And so I think that's really hard. But the positive is, there's so much time spent with family, reconnecting. As a new mom, I'm loving the aspect of like sort of an extended maternity leave. I would have been leaving the house probably about 9:30 or 10 o'clock in the morning and coming home at 6 or 7 o'clock at night and getting so little time with Logan. And I get all this extra time with him, so he's getting an added, I mean, he probably isn't super aware of it, but he's getting all this extra time with my husband and I, that is different and one-on-one that he wouldn't have gotten, had we been working on a regular job. So there are some positive things. I think also having kids, yes, they've been on screens more, but I think having them also think outside the box. Our parents always say to us, like, we didn't have TV and we didn't have internet, our parents let us, run amongst the streets, till the lights came on, and sort of doing more play outside, that kind of thing. I think that's been, good for kids, and trying to figure out like, okay, I'm bored. What can I do to keep myself entertained? There's more arts and craft going on. At the beginning of the pandemic, there was a COVID booklet that was sent around. I don't know if any of you saw it on here, but it was a really cute little booklet of like how to explain COVID to kids. And it was a coloring book, and they could do activities and like add memories to it. So I think sort of like acknowledging, yes, this year is hard, but also what are the things that we got out of it? And how do we make memories? How do we make this a time capsule, as not just this year that we need to shove under the rug and forget?
Beautiful. I love that too. It feels very Jewish to sort of see the world through a positive lens, to, even though we know that times are hard, we're not denying that. We're not shoving that down. We're
Yeah.
not quashing that. But where are the blessings? And it can be hard on a busy day when there are kids tugging at you and you're trying to work, or if you're home feeling lonely, on any side of the spectrum, to remember the blessings, but whenever we can, how nurturing is that for us to really sort of tap into the awe and the transcendence of this time, and just thank God that we are healthy and that we're safe. Rabbi Sari and I were in Rabbi Yoshi's yard today doing a socially distance visit and meeting, and he was saying he's had dinner with his kids, every single night during this pandemic, and they're teenagers, and he never would have had that experience with them had this horrible situation not happen. So I really love the idea of leaning into the blessings and encouraging our children to do that. You mentioned briefly earlier about sort of political anxiety.
Mhm.
I know we're all sort of coming down from last week, whether we are disappointed or we are excited or we're frustrated about the limbo that we're in. I know everybody's feeling something different, but I know that it has been very anxiety producing for people. So I'm wondering, is this, how do we deal with other people when everybody in the system is feeling anxious and is having disagreements? How do we show up as our best selves, and how do we take care of ourselves? Is that a different situation, or are they the same principles?
I think sometimes the best advice I've given clients and the best advice like my friends and I talk about is sometimes we just need to shut it off. And I've found that, I don't have problems with other people having different viewpoints, but sometimes if what they're posting online is adding negativity to my life, I just need to remove myself. I need to not read it. I've either unfollowed or muted people in the last couple of weeks just because it was like I would read things and it would just make me angry. And it's like, well, this isn't helpful for me, because then I bring that anger into my house, and then I bring it into my relationship with my husband and relationship with my child. And that's just not helpful or fair to any of them. So I think there's, showing up for me, for my best self is sometimes stepping away, getting off social media or getting away from the news. And I think we just all sort of have to decide what works for us. What works for me may be different than you, and vice versa.
I love that. Yeah, I have done something in between that's helped me. Like, I moved my Instagram app to the back of my phone so that I don't want to be off Instagram. I love being in connection. I love being connected to people, but I didn't need to check it so much.
Mhm.
So it's in a hard to reach place. So if I get there once a day, it feels really nice, you know.
Yeah.
I love that. That feels good. I'm gonna ask people to give us some questions. So if folks want to type in the chat a couple of questions, and then we can ask Michelle, or we can also unmute people. Let's start with the chat, and I'll ask her one more question as some questions come in. So I'm just wondering, as a therapist, how has your Judaism influenced your work, if at all? Did growing up Jewish and maybe anxious make you want to be a therapist? Where has your Judaism played into your practice? And you're such a grounded person, and I'm lucky to know you. So you're so driven by your values.
My dad may tell you otherwise.
Okay.
No, I think,
Give us some questions in the chat if you have any.
yeah. So I think, I don't know that initially like Judaism per se, sent me in this direction. I always joke about, I sort of actually fell into becoming an anxiety specialist. It wasn't what I had planned in grad school, but I love it. And it spoke to me because we're, as you said, like I grew up in LA, I grew up amongst Jews, I'm Jewish. Jewish anxiety is a real thing. And so it like working with people who were anxious really spoke to me. Like I got the treatment. I like the cognitive behavioral therapy is a really sort of like problem solving oriented, therapy. There's a lot of coping skills, and it's not just sitting here asking, how did your mom mess you up or your dad mess you up, right? It's really about like, I'm struggling. What do I need to do? And that really spoke to me. And so I think that brought it. But in terms of Judaism, like I grew up in a community, and that was not just, I feel like where I grew up, we didn't really have a community on our block necessarily. We had a couple kids, but we lived far from my elementary school. And so it was more like the community we had growing up at the temple, the Hebrew school, the Purim carnival, the groups of people that we would spend time with. And so that I think is what motivates me, is who I am and who I spend time with. And I've grown a community amongst therapists. We have a 1,000-person community that my friend and I grew in the last 2 years. And it's now nationwide, which is awesome. And so it's like I'm, constantly connecting and talking to my friends, and that's the community that I grew up with at Wise.
That's wonderful. I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
So Rabbi Kroll wrote, how is it that everybody seems to be so behind on getting things done? This has never happened to her before. And she says, I just don't know how to cope with this yet. And it's just not me. And I think a lot of us probably feel that, like some things that don't feel familiar about ourselves are coming out in this weird time. And how do we manage that?
Yeah. So I think, we're so used to the structure. I get up, pre-COVID and pre-child, I got up at 5 a.m. I worked out, I got ready for work. I drove to my job. I was at my job all day, and I knew sort of like how I segmented my day. Now, I don't work Fridays, or like Wednesday mornings, I usually have off to do admin stuff. And it's amazing how quickly we can find things and get sidetracked by something. Like we'll walk over here and we're like, oh, I have to put these things away. We'll go to take that to put away and get sidetracked over there. And so what we end up doing is just kind of pushing things around and not getting a whole lot done. A couple of weeks ago, I took a week off for professional development, and I had a list of about 8 things to do. But I also had so many. I met with you, I had other meetings to do, and I got about half of one thing done. And I was like, okay, that I need to do that. Like I need to take a whole month off to catch up. So I think we're all constantly like that, where it's just like we have to set our expectations differently. And we also have to give kindness to ourselves and recognize when, like that I have accomplished something. It may not be all the things I used to accomplish, or that I think I should be able to accomplish. But the fact that I got out of bed and got dressed today, or that I, got up here, or, I kept worrying that I would forget about our meeting tonight, because I don't usually do things at 8 o'clock at night. So we have to give ourselves credit for the little things and not focus on how I compared my life to pre-COVID.
Thank you for giving us permission to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's all about self-compassion. 2020 is self-compassion.
Eugenia is talking about her 2 tweens. Oh, I miss them. There's been so much emphasis on anxiety among kids their age. Well, I think both of them are doing well so far. What are some red flags to distinguish between worry and anxiety?
I think we always need to work to focus on how it's impacting us. And if your kids don't seem to be not doing well, then don't worry about it. There was, Emma, at the beginning, you had talked about Gemara was talking about like the future and worrying about tomorrow. Is if a statement starts with what if, you're trying to solve a problem that doesn't yet exist. So if your kids seem to be handling this okay, that's fine. But in terms of red flags, really start to notice whether or not it's impacting their social activities with their friends. Like, are they not interested in talking to friends, or getting online with friends, or ignoring text messages? Are they starting to fail at school? Now, a lot of kids are struggling this year with like Zoom classes and not having as much interaction. And so a lot of kids are failing, but that doesn't, or not doing well, or struggling. That doesn't mean that's a necessarily red flag. I think this is a difficult time, but notice things where they're different than they normally are. This could be for anything, right? When I work with health anxiety, it's always like, okay, I have a headache. Well, when do I run to the hospital and say I have a headache? And I really think about looking long-term of like, how long has this symptom been going on? Is it getting better? Is it getting worse? Is it staying the same? And so we think of that as with any of this stuff is, am I noticing things that are different? Are they getting worse? Are they stabilizing? How is it impacting their day-to-day functioning?
That's wonderful. And I think for those of us who have kids at home, that's really helpful. And also, as you were talking, I'm thinking about myself. Where do I recognize those things myself, or with Adam? How do I notice? Don't create a problem like the Gemara says that doesn't exist. Let's stay in the present. But if something feels off, how do we notice those things with kindness and compassion?
Yeah.
And Brenda's asking, oh, I've heard about this is very common. What do you tell a teen that's worried about getting COVID? She's very anxious about it. I've been talking to some of our teens, some of our mentors, and while they miss their friends and want to see them, the more people are interacting, the more people are also, poo. We don't want any cases in our community, but we have a million cases in California right now. So how do we help our family members stay calm, especially a young teen who's so craving social interaction?
Yeah, I think what I tell my clients to do is, follow the CDC guidelines, wash your hands, be safe, but also we need to have some normalcy in our life. I never stopped going to the grocery store. I went a little bit less frequently at the very beginning, but to me, that was something I needed to keep myself sane. I didn't see friends for a really long time. I only did things online. I've seen friends a little bit more socially distanced. I think it's talking about the reality of what COVID is, what isn't, how we can get it, how we won't get it. If you are 6 feet apart with your friends outside and you're both wearing masks, you're probably pretty safe, and you're probably pretty okay. It's don't go licking things, right? And don't go sharing food. But it's it is scary. We can acknowledge. I'm all about acknowledging feelings and saying, like, I understand that you're afraid of this. A lot of people in our country and across the world have this, but there are ways to keep ourselves safe and try and prevent getting it and not just stay isolated.
Brenda's saying, I will definitely tell her not to lick anything. Amazing.
As an OCD therapist, we used to lick a lot of things, so we've had to change our rules.
Oh God, that's great. Michelle, you're amazing.
Thank you.
I'm wondering if you can share in the chat at some point how folks can contact you and your practice. If they have more questions. And this has just been so helpful. I think really, I'm thinking a lot lately, like, how do I move? It sounds corny, but truly, how do I move at the speed of love rather than at the speed of just wanting and efficiency? I know a lot of us are dealing with that right now. We have a lot of anxiety around Thanksgiving. How do we get together with family? Who do we include? And I just want to encourage all of you to lead with love and not your anxiety. And by that, I mean, don't worry so much about, tomorrow. Let's worry about today and staying healthy. And we're going to be with our families next year. So what can we do today to stay hopeful and stay healthy? Of course, everyone makes their own decisions. But really, how do we lead with love and stay in the moment? My favorite psalm is Psalm 46:11. Be still and know that I am with you. And I felt that tonight, not just the you in God in the breaths that we took, but the you in community. Michelle volunteered her time tonight to be with us and to teach. And all of you just taking this evening and to share, this means so much. And our wise women leadership, there's just so much incredible planning and detail that goes into everything. To Erin and Rama and Ariana and Keely from WPA, just everybody who helped even just send an email to get folks here tonight to hear this wonderful message. It warms my heart. So lead with love, know that God's with us. I think Rabbi Sari's gonna close us out for the evening. And again, Michelle, we just really can't thank you enough. We
Thank
love
you for having me.
So
Michelle, thank you so much. Like Cantor Emma, like I think I needed it also. And Cantor Emma, I'm going to take that, the live at the speed of love. I love that. So I'm going to take that with me. I just wanted to close, I think, sort of full circle from where Cantor Emma started us, of sort of grounding ourselves in the moment. So we're in Parshat Chaye Sarah, which is the portion where it's the end of Sarah's life, though I've always found it interesting that they title it the life of Sarah, even though it actually the parsha this week begins with the end of her life. And we looked at this, our clergy team, earlier today, but it starts with, these are the years of Sarah's life, and she lived to 127, which, whether it's actually 127, that's a whole different conversation. But the way that they write it in the Torah is it actually says 100 years and 20 years and 7 years. So rather than saying 127, it says 120 and 7. And I once heard a teaching that, and I wish I could remember exactly where it was, if it was classical or if it was modern, but it has really struck with me that the reason it's written that way is that none of us live just a single life, that we live through the seasons of our lives, and some feel really long, right? Some feel like they're 100 years, and some are sort of in the middle, and some feel really short, maybe the 7 year. And when we come to the end of our life, right, that's where we see all of it, but that we can only see the season that we're in. And so I just wanted, as we we opened with sort of grounding and setting, and that, like, we're in the season that we're in, and there's opportunities for growth and change in that, and there's also, in this particular season, lots of anxiety and worry, both of those things probably happening, but that I think our tradition also reminds us, to everything there's a season, and so that this one will at some point come to a close, and we'll move on to the next one. And that hopefully, Michelle, so much of what you said resonated, of how do we take this time and live with love and grow through it, and grow into whatever comes next. So thank you for helping guide us with that. And thank you, Cantor Emma, for putting all of this together. It was really beautiful.
Thank you. Thanks, Rabbi. Thank you, Michelle. Good night, everybody. And please join us for Shabbat tomorrow night at 6:15 on Facebook or on YouTube. And again, Michelle shared her contact information in the chat, and she has some wonderful, interviewed on some podcasts if you want some more. So thanks again, Michelle. And thank you all. Good night. Laila Tov. Sleep well. Sleep without anxiety tonight. Deep breath in your heart.
Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Michelle. It was
Everybody
great.
should come back for Otherwise Women events.
That's right.
Oh, hi. Hi.
Hi. Good to see everybody.
Oh,
This was beautiful.
I
I'm
do
so
need-
anxious I couldn't even talk.
Sleep well, everybody. Sleep healthy.
Thank you.
Hopefully.
Thank you, Emma. Thank you, Michelle.
Love you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.